25th of August, and this is how I've been doing on the Lotto. And the most recent draw, I had one number up pick, a 4 number up pick, and 2 full lines. And I'm keeping track of my balance from now on. So I'm keeping a track of everything that I spend and how much I win, just to let you know how I'm doing. Looking at the draw history, you can see it goes Arthur, Merlin, Arthur. They use the same machine 4 times in a row. So the next draw is going to be, they're going to be using Arthur. And if you look at which set of balls they use the same one twice, and it goes up in ascending order, so it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see obviously the next one's going to be set 3. So it makes sense to predict that the next result is going to be machine Arthur, set of balls 3, and so I'm going to see what predictions I can make. Now this is a chart for that machine and set of balls. As you can see, 13 of the numbers have never been drawn yet using that combination of Arthur set 3, and the only number that stands out on this chart is 11 because it has the biggest area when you multiply the recency by the frequency, and that's compared to all the other numbers. So number 11 stands out. Now looking at the analyzer, this summarises the chart we've just been looking at in this cell here, and it also summarises the chart for just that set of balls on its own, and that chart looks like this. And on that chart you can see number 34 is the number that stands out the most in 2 ways, because it's the most overdue and the most overdue for its frequency. And this line here represents the average height of the chart for set 3, and you can see 34 is above that average, so it's a good prediction that that number could be drawn based on this chart. Now if we look at the chart for the machine, which is Arthur, then that chart looks like this, and as you can see, number 6 clearly the most overdue, and it's well above the average height in the chart, so at the moment that is actually pushing that average line up. And then the number that stands out the most in general is 54, because it's most overdue for its frequency, and the most frequent is 52. So those are 3 numbers to look at on this chart. And then on the chart for all machines and sets of balls, you can see 41 most overdue and most overdue for its frequency, and the most frequent number is 52 and 58, both the same frequency. And so those are the charts, those are the 4 charts that are summarised on this section of the analyzer. So if you're thinking about picking number 11, then these are some of the numbers that stand out to go with that number. Another one that stood out was 34, 54 and 41. If you notice, those are the numbers that are at the top in the middle of each of these analyzer sections. So these are the numbers that stand out with those numbers if you were to look at the charts. And the numbers at the side of these numbers are the values, so you can see how much they stand out. So for instance, on this chart you can see the next value down it's the difference between this value and the next value down that defines how much it stands out. So for instance, let's have a look at this one. Okay, so that's how much it stands out. But anyway, one thing I noticed, okay, so I've got a list of all the most outstanding pairs based on these values, which are basically how much the number that stands out the most stands out. And this is just looking at the ones that are in purple, the ones that are most overdue for the frequency. So I've ranked all the most outstanding pairs, and that's based on this information. And what I've noticed is that when a winning result is drawn, and I look at this list, it's not always the top most outstanding pairs that come out. I mean, it tends to be, if you do get one of these pairs on this list, it could be anywhere on the list. And so it has occurred to me that perhaps the rank doesn't really matter. And so what I thought of doing, and the reason why I'm making this video, is just to show you that if you take each pair on this list, for instance, start with the highest ranking pair, 8 and 58, and if you look at a chart for 8 and 58, you can see it's based on these values, and if you look the frequency of the pair 8 and 58, the frequency is 9 and the most recent draw is 2351. And if you look on 58's chart, it's going to be the same frequency and draw number. Again, frequency is 9, most recent draw 2351. And so you can take the frequency and recency of each draw, and I put that alongside the rank, and I put I listed the pairs by their ranks, and I put the frequencies and recencies, most recent draw of each one of these pairs into this column, and then I looked at which one's the minimum, the maximum, minimum, maximum. That gives you a range, and then I realised, you can use that to create a chart. And so, as you can see on a normal chart, you've got the frequency and the draw numbers, and then the numbers are scattered out. But these are individual numbers. But on this chart, these are all of the most outstanding pairs. Now, the actual number of pairs that exists in this game altogether is, hang on a minute, that's wrong. Right, the total number of pairs is 1,711. That's how many pairs there are, and I'm only looking at the 46 that stand out the most because of the value of each number on each other number's chart, and the sum of those values. So they're ranked by this sum, which is basically the area under each number. And so I produce this chart, if I put every pair on this chart, then the frequency would go from 0 to 11, which is the frequency of the most frequent pair. But I can't really do a chart with 1,711 pairs on it, because when you fill each cell on the chart, you're using nested ifs, and you can only have so many nested ifs until you run out of nested ifs. You can't have that many nested ifs in a chart cell, in a spreadsheet cell. You can't have 1,711 nested ifs. So to make things simple, I just listed the most outstanding pairs on this chart. And what's interesting to note is that the highest ranking pairs are on the edge of the chart. And when I say the edge, what I mean is as the draws progress, let's look at this pair, for example, pair number 11. Obviously, as the draw numbers progress, that's going to stay where it is, and the chart will grow like this. And as it grows, some of the pairs that have come out before will drop to the bottom, and it'll stay where it is, and so it ends up being there. And as they scatter, the frequency increases, so the chart grows in this direction and this direction. So wherever the pair is on this chart, for instance this pair, the chart's going to grow like this, and that's just going to stay where it is, and eventually that's going to move up to there, and unless it drops. And what happens is, relative to the area that you're looking at, each one of these steadily rises up the chart until they drop, and then they drop back down to the bottom. They end up here at the bottom. So if this pair was to come out, if 8 and 58 came out in the next draw, then that one there would drop down to there. And then it'd be replaced by another pair, because we're looking at the pairs by ranks. So what's interesting to note is that the lower these numbers, or should I say the higher the rank of each pair, the closer it is to the edge in the chart. And the edge is the upper right side of this scattering of numbers. And then you'll notice that the higher numbers, or the lower ranking pairs, they tend to populate more towards the lower left side of this scattering. And the reason why, obviously, because the area under the pair is based on the areas of the individual numbers on each other numbers chart. So the thing to look out for is not necessarily the rank of the pair, but how close it is to the edge. So for instance, if you look at sort of the upper half, you can see that most of the numbers are below 20 except for one. So looking at the analyzer, and we look at pair number 20, it's more likely that this one will come out than the highest ranking pair because of its position on this chart. So when it comes to picking your numbers, if you're going to pick one of these most outstanding pairs, then instead of looking at where they are in terms of the rank, that only gives you a general idea, because obviously the higher they rank, the more likely they are to be at the outer edge. But where they actually are on this chart, that's going to increase the probability of it coming out if it's closer to the top right corner. So, for instance, this pair, 14 and 21, you notice 14's most frequent with that set of balls. And then let's see where 21 appears. If we look at the analyzer in coincidence mode, and you see straight away one of the numbers that stood out the most with that machine, 54, well, it just so happens that 21, which is one of these two numbers in that pair, number 20, that stands out on the pairs chart, is one that stands out the most with 54, which stands out the most on the chart for Arthur. So you can also see 21 stands out there. So if we look at the chart for set of balls number 3, then what you're going to see is 21 and 14. See, 14 is the most frequent number, and 21's on the edge of this chart. And if we look at the chart for Arthur, and again, let's locate these numbers. Notice how they're in densely populated cells. Now, the probability of a number dropping out of any cell increases with the number of numbers that are in that cell. Okay, so a cell with 4 numbers in it is twice as likely that one of the numbers in that cell is going to drop, simply because there's twice as many numbers in that cell as compared to one with only 2 in it, or 4 times more likely than one with only 1 in it. So for a prediction, these are some of the numbers that I would consider to predict for the next draw. So anyway, I hope that this is helpful to you if you're picking your numbers for the next draw. If you want me to show you, for instance, what the chart looks like for each of those numbers, and well, just each one of these numbers, and you can see which numbers stand out the most with those numbers. And the ones that you want to be looking at are the ones that are on the edge of the chart, because as the chart progresses, each number rises up steadily, and then when it drops, it goes down to the bottom and moves across 1. So for instance, if 21 dropped on this chart in the next draw, then when the next set of numbers arrives at the bottom of the chart, that one would disappear from there and drop down to the bottom. It would move like this. See? That's how they move. So if I were to take all the numbers that I've just been looking at, oops, now all the numbers that I was looking at just now, if they were to drop, it would look like that. So that's just hypothetical, what it could possibly look like if those numbers dropped, and that's where they are. So these are the charts you want to look at. Those are some of the numbers you want to perhaps consider. Obviously you'll have your own set of numbers that you want to pick. So this is the chart for each of those numbers. So we've got the one for 14, looks like that, and then one for 21, looks like that. That's the chart for 34. 54 looks like that. So for the next round I would predict that probably at least one of these numbers is going to come out. And this is where the other numbers are in relation to those numbers. So I think that's enough for this video. It's the 25th of August.